Let's talk a little bit about PyTest. But before we do that, let's talk about this function to convert Celsius to Fahrenheit. So I have this function, convert Celsius to Fahrenheit. It's going to take in some Celsius value. I'm going to check to see whether or not this Celsius value is an integer. If so, great. We're going to go ahead and compute this formula here and then return that result. If it's not an integer, right, that parameter is not an integer, we're going to raise an exception. And we're going to raise a type error exception, and this is going to be the message that we're going to be using. Only integers are allowed. So this is the function. I'm going to use this example for this function to use for unit testing. So before we do that, I do have this def main, right? This method just main, just to show that this is not considered Pythonic. In Python, we don't want to do if _name equals main and then just call this main function here. Why? Because what we should do is take this over and put it here directly. And then this is Pythonic. Why? Because we're not invoking a function that doesn't take any input and it doesn't return anything. So again, this is really what you want to do in terms of being Pythonic. We're going to call this directly, and we know that this file, when we invoke this file directly, it's going to have this attribute for _name to be equals _main, this string, and this block of code is going to execute because we're invoking this directly. So far so good. Let's just run this a little bit just to see what we get. And we get 109.4. That's the value we get for this. And that's fine. But let's do a test with unit test in Python. And you may have seen that one way to do these tests, or a way to do tests, is using the assert statement. But I really wanted to show you this other way of using unit tests, right? In this particular case, we're going to use unit tests that's built into Python, and we still have to import it just to let Python know, hey, look, we want to use this module. It's a built-in module. We're going to import Celsius, which is this file that I just showed you maybe 5 seconds ago, and then we're going to start writing our tests. What does that mean? We're going to have a class. I'm calling it validate conversion. It's going to inherit from unittest.testCase. This is why we need this unit test import statement here. Then we're going to have these three functions, right? Test valid input, test invalid input, and test invalid input 2. These are going to be 3 tests. Let's run this first, and then we'll talk about each test. So if I run and say Python test, we'll see that these 3 tests run and it's okay. Basically, we have a check mark here. So that means that we're fine. It's there's not an issue. I do want to show you what each one of these mean. So for example, test valid input, we're going to take in self, right? This is a class. This is similar to the this keyword in other languages. We're going to say something like self dot notation assert equal. What are we going to assert? That's equals. Well, we're going to assert that this convert Celsius to Fahrenheit invocation, this call with the integer 43, it's going to return 109.4. If so, great. If not, it would break. So for example, we know we get 109.4, but let's say we get 109.9 here. We know that if we run this, this should break. And in fact, it does break, right? It basically does not pass. Test that failed 1, passed 2 out of 3 tests, right? So that's what we mean by that. So we know that this here would work, and tests passed is 3 now. So this is very important. You want to basically make sure that whatever you're invoking, you get the expected value. So this is just to show this statement here. I had it commented out just to show you that this would break, right? Because it would fail, rather, because it would be 109, not 109.4. So I'm going to just remove this just to keep things simple, and we know that's fine. Now, what else? what else? Let's talk about this test invalid input. Test invalid input here. We're going to basically make sure that the this is going to raise an error message, right? Why? It's going to basically assume that it gets we're passing ed, right, and to this function, and we know that ed is no good, right? So, for example, that's why it passes. So if we said something like, I don't know, 43. Let's see what happens when we do 43, just to see if we can see the contrast here. We see that here, assert raises type error, Celsius 43, search error, type error not raised. So this is not raising anything. Why? Because this is a valid input. So what you want to do is you got to say invalid input of some sort. Remember that we're throwing an exception only if it's not an integer. So this is not an integer, and that should pass. And it does. Passed 3 out of 3 tests. So that's what happens here. How about test invalid input number 2? This is another way, and that's using a context manager. And I just wanted to show you that's exactly the same as this one. One's using a context manager, the other one is not. I will make a video eventually about context managers and how you can create your own. But for now, I just wanted to show you that difference. The other thing I wanted to show you is that, yes, I've been right-clicking on this, right, to run the tests. And the tests run fine, but really, you could also run this just by jumping in your terminal and running this command that I'm basically running here. It's the same exact thing. So, for example, if I type this in here and I run it, ran 3 tests, everything's okay. Only integers are allowed. Well, that's what happens when I print this info here, right? When it throws this, it throws an exception, right? So based on this assert. So that is the beauty of doing this, right? You can have this info and print it out as well. I'm hoping this is making sense. Just another way that I wanted to show you how you can run tests. And it's not even the only way. You can also do PyTest. Maybe I'll do a video on that. But PyTest is yet another module that you could use. This is PyTest. This is built in. It's really quick and easy. And you can really separate your tests from your code. You can even have a tests directory and have all your tests there. That's the reason why I like it more than anything else, just because you can organize your tests in such a way that it's not built into your code. And I know when you do if under name equals under main, I know that's still separated. It's not going to run unless you call invoke that file directly. But this just feels a little bit cleaner. And I certainly wanted to show you because I am sure you'll see this in your path in software development, in any language really, but in this case we're using unittest with Python.